Tom, I want to start with something that gave me such anxiety and is actually 20 years old, but it only just gave me anxiety today.
Is one of your children?
Let me just ask you, let me start with this. Let me ask you a question. When's the last time you had a massive computer failure to the point where you seriously lost data?
I have been so lucky that I have ultimately been able to get the data back. Like, it's gone, but it was user error and I just figured it out. And now you helped me figure out how to turn on autosave. And I have a time machine, like the time machine and a real time machine.
Yeah, right.
So I can go back
in
and
time
say,
and get data.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So because I'm me, I've been extraordinarily lucky that hasn't happened too much. But the idea of it is so scary.
You're in the film business and you work non-linearly, right? So that means you're editing on your computer, right? You have no film.
Correct.
Anymore. There's and I imagine when you're shooting, you're not even shooting on tape, right? You're shooting on disc.
Now, yeah. Oh, that actually happened during Adam and Evelyn, where it was one of the biggest short films that I made, where we thought we lost because everything was on P5 cards, PS. I can't remember what it was, but that was when it was being downloaded. There was one person whose job it was to take it off the discs and put it onto a hard drive, take it off the disc. Anyways, we got home that night and had lost an entire day of shooting. And in a short film for no money, we were just dead. We don't have enough money to go back. It turned out that the person who was looking at it just needed to scroll down. It was there. It was just out of it. But that was after me having diarrhea for like 3 hours.
Well,
sorry, go ahead.
I read this story today and it caused me to look up something that actually, in terms of the filmmaking business, this film is particularly powerful to me, and that is Toy Story 2. Do you know the Toy Story 2 story?
Not at all.
So the work was being done, and it was very tight. And Lasseter was working on A Bug's Life, and his team was over there. So there was this other team working on Toy Story 2, and it was originally supposed to be a direct-to-video thing. And that wasn't working as well in terms of the contract deal. So there was just a lot of examination of what's going to go on. And in the process, while routinely cleaning files, one of the animators accidentally typed /bin/rm/r/f***. Now, I know that's a thing, but they're all using these Unix-based systems.
Classic rookie mistake.
Classic.
Just kidding.
Well, and what that does is actually does a pretty significant cleanup by effectively deleting all your files, right?
Oh my God. Why is that a thing?
But it's also because a film is so big, it takes a long time to do that. So they accidentally start this deletion. It's called the root folder, right? They do this deletion of the root folder of the Toy Story 2 assets on Pixar's internal network servers, right? It's terrible. So I did not know this story. And it turns out I came up, you remember our old friend Quora, right?
Yep.
Turns out Owen Jacob was one of the technical directors on the film, and he was the first one to notice because character models started disappearing from the works in progress. Can you imagine? No. It's like the snap, things just start disappearing.
The Thanos snap? Yeah.
So they shut down the servers, but according to Wikipedia, they'd lost 90% of the last 2 years of work, and the backups had failed 3 months prior.
Oh my God.
So why is this? That is a summary of what Wikipedia had said of it. But Quora came up and Owen Jacob actually jumped in and said, hey, I was there. I'm the guy in all of the stories about this. So let me tell you what happened. So he says, in his words, it wasn't multiple terabytes of information, neither all the rendered frames, nor all the data necessary to render those frames in animation, model shaders, set, and lighting data files was that size back then. It's all very, very big. But the problem was it was unclear what files were deleted. It wasn't just like, oh, Woody's gone. Let's go find a backup of Woody. It was the problem was they started going back through all their backups, and their backups were reporting, hey, you've got good backups here, but it turns out the backup software was flummoxed by a disk full error and didn't know that it wasn't sending errors, that the backups had failed 3 months prior. And so it was this other animator who was on maternity leave and had taken her work computer home and was animating off the network and said, hey, I actually have some of these files. I'm going to bring my computer in and we're going to assess it and figure out how we can rebuild it. So they start rebuilding all these files. And I mean, a skeleton crew is looking at 30,000 individual files and frames and character models to assess whether or not they can be rebuilt. And eventually they totally rebuild it. And the way he says, the total number of files involved was well into six figures, but we'll round down to 100,000 for the sake of this discussion.
Man.
If your heart isn't beating fast right now, then you're not wired right. If you're in this business, that is extraordinary. So they took this 2-month-old backup. They took this animator's computer. They had stray files from failed renders that they brought back into the fold, and they individually repaired this and were able to essentially, like, there were pieces of the movie that they just weren't able to rebuild. And so they just rebuilt what they could and created a movie out of it. And
that was Toy Story 2.
No, this is the part that will really frustrate you. All this work, John Lasseter, Steve Jobs, everybody comes back in and they're discussing the movie and they're like, you know what? We need to release this movie theatrically. And the movie that we have here, the story is weak. We're starting over. And according to Owen, he says, some months later, Pixar rewrote the film from almost the ground up, and we made Toy Story 2 again. The rewritten film is the one you saw in theaters and that you can now watch on Blu-ray.
So they fixed everything and then threw it out?
Threw it out.
God!
I think about that story and I am in an internal fireworks fit because I have lost a significant amount of data. I have lost data that's important to me, and I wasn't able to rebuild it. And I had never heard this story. I think I would have just given up computers had I heard this story when that happened to me. It's terrible. But
as a matter of perspective, you were working on Cars 4.
Welcome to What's That Smell, a sometimes funny podcast about humans and their anxieties. I'm Pete Wright.
And I'm Tommy Metz III.
And every week we each drag one of our deepest, darkest anxieties into the light to share it, learn about it.
And hopefully laugh about it with all of you.
Reach Wow.
I don't know about that one.
That was something. Okay. Reach out. Go to whatsthatsmell.net and send us a story of your anxiety. Just push the button. It says submit your anxiety. It's right at the top. You can't miss it. Send it to us there, and we just might talk about you on this show. And with that, Thomas, I will go first. I'm a real mess today, Tom.
Oh.
You know how sometimes we say we're sweat prepping?
Yep.
Yeah, no, it's been a real day of it.
Oh,
and I realized that we've spent, now we're nearing the end of season 5 of this show.
So weird.
So many years we've been talking about our anxieties, and there's one that we have not named. And I really can't believe that we haven't actually talked about it yet.
Okay.
Because I think you and I both suffer from it heavily, and we've talked around it a lot. I mean, a lot. But we haven't talked of it. And so I ask you some questions.
Okay.
Do you worry what people think of you?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Do you worry about your ability to pursue the future that you desire?
Sure. Yeah.
Do you worry that this is like a greatest hits? Do you worry that people will lose interest in you?
Yeah. Abandonment. We talked about this last episode.
Yeah, I know.
Yep.
Do you worry about how smart or capable you are?
Yep, of course.
Yeah. How about disappointing people whose opinion you value?
Why do you have my diary?
Do you tell people beforehand? I don't even care what you say to these anymore. Do you tell people beforehand that you don't expect to succeed in order to lower their expectations?
Oh, sure.
Do you have trouble imagining what you could have done differently to succeed if you fail at something?
Maybe. Sure.
Do you often get last minute headaches, stomach aches, or physical symptoms that prevent you from completing a job or getting ready for a job?
Not headaches, sometimes stomach aches, and I get the shaky hands.
Oh yeah, shaky hands.
Yeah.
Jazz hands, but more of a palsy.
Right. I call them scream hands.
Oh, good. No, that's good too. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
How often do you find you run out of time before leading up to an event or a job?
Only because I have put my back against the wall by postponing it for so long.
Yeah, that's it. So we've talked a little bit about that, but what hit me this morning was this fear, this anxiety that I have over, I'm sitting there saying to myself, God, I'm just not ready. I'm not prepared. I am terrified of not being prepared. And I've never put my finger on that. And it turns out a quick search, and there's a word for it, Tom. The word exists.
The fear of not being prepared?
The fear of not being prepared. It's actually it's actually related to perfectionism. It is atelophobia.
Oh, it's a real word.
Yeah. No, that's a real word.
It's not one of the make-em-ups that we
do
find on the
make-em-ups
internet.
too. Yeah.
Okay.
No,
Wow.
This is a real thing. And so we've talked about this in the past. Part of the reason that it's so hard to talk about this word is how meta the experience is right now, that it took me so much to actually get to the point where I could even begin to prepare for this show about not being prepared.
Yeah. You started thinking about this on episode 1, season 1.
Yeah. I had to go search for it to see if we've ever done this. And it turns out back in season 3, we did something related to it. And we had a listener submission where a listener wrote in. Do you remember?
I'm not sure.
It was the listener wrote in about how they could not write email.
Oh yeah, yes,
right?
yes.
This was related to the perfectionism bit,
correct?
Which I think is really fascinating. All of those things that I read are symptomatic of atelophobia, right? These are the things that you think, the repetitive thought patterns, the things that are going on in your brain that define what your experience is of the fear of not being prepared. And often, one of the challenges that we have with it is it's often mistaken for one of the symptoms. Like, for example, fear of giving presentations.
Oh, I see. They're so tied together.
Yes.
One can hide behind the other.
Yeah, exactly. And it deals with such a specific symptom of this that it's really hard to separate yourself and say, you know what, it's not just presentations. Presentations involves the public speaking and the potential failure and the social issues that come along with failing in a public situation. And all of that those are very loud voices. Right. And they're very, very difficult to silence those in order to step back and see that I really am afraid of not being enough in many circumstances, not just presenting. What do you think about this? Talk a little bit about your experience of it.
I have actually been going through something like this, or working on this process during the pandemic, and part of it involved that class that I took and that paper that almost got away from me.
Right, that nearly killed you.
Yeah, one of the things that I have and it's a little embarrassing to say just recently learned, because it should be obvious, but it's something that I've learned about myself that I need to do, is when it's called setting the table. Actually, I call it packing my briefcase.
Okay.
When I get a new project, sometimes what happens is, and it's not due right away, I don't look at it yet.
Okay.
I sort of give it a glance and I'm like, okay, so I can sort of percolate on that. But whether it's learning a song for a show that I'm in before the pandemic, writing a paper, I've learned that what I need to do is really, I don't have to learn it right away, but I have to know what I'm going to have to learn. Yeah. So if it's a song, look at the choreography, see how difficult it is. Look at the lyrics, highlight them, make sure, because if I don't do that, then it just exists in this really dark, scary bubble called to do that is looming over me. And it becomes so much more than it needs to be when I finally sit down, when my back is up against the wall and I look at it, I'm like, oh, I was in agony for 2 weeks. And instead this took 2 hours.
Yeah,
I just never looked at it. Yeah. So I think that relates, I hope that relates to being prepared is one of the things. My fear of being unprepared keeps me from being prepared. And so I'm learning that I really need to unpack so I can pack.
Well, yeah, I mean, that I think directly applies, particularly when you talk about something like choreography or learning music, right? Because it's not like you can, like some people, if you're really great at giving presentations, right? If you're ultimately a pretty good improviser and you can, kind of think on your feet, you may still have this fear, even though your personal experience is when you're under pressure, you can deliver.
Right.
But when you have to really learn something, memorize a song, memorize lyrics, get the choreography down so you don't look like an ape, that is, to me, something, I mean, that takes a certain amount of time, predictable repetition to actually get good at that. And
you can't sweat prep choreography or a song. You have to deep, get it ingrained in your head.
Which is weird because I think Bob Fosse was actually the one who came up with sweat prepping.
Sweat prepping?
Yeah, no, you can't do that. It's just not it. And that's a thing that really stresses me out. When I have cold sweat nightmares, it's usually around something like that, something where I'm not prepared. But it's not the thing that I'm really scared of being not prepared of. It's something that I can't be prepared to do, front an opera or climb a mountain or something. It's just, it takes a lot.
Climb an opera.
I could climb an opera. It takes a lot of time to learn to do the things that I'm not prepared to do. And so that's the metaphor for my general day-to-day, Happy Monday kind of experience. So, now, because we've talked about this, I wanted to introduce a new concept that was just introduced to me very recently, and that is the stages of acceptance.
Okay.
So this new concept that was new to me is a staged approach to dealing with this thing. You've heard of the stages of grief, right?
DABDA.
You've acronymed the stages of grief. Is that what you just did?
Yeah, I thought that was Roy G. Biv, people call it DABDA. No?
I've never in my life heard that. Is that, I don't mean to, no, I'm the foolish one here. I've never heard that. And I think maybe in these circles, you are now the cool one? Is that weird?
Because I have a grief acronym.
You have a grief acronym?
That doesn't sound cool. You know what would be cool? Being a quarterback. Instead, I have grief acronyms all locked up. Well, I think I've just always thought of it as DABDA.
This is I've got a new one for you, and it's Dre.
Okay.
Now, this is, I would say, originated by Marty Cooper, therapist Marty Cooper. And back in 2011, he starts looking at this, posting about this mini map, and he calls it the path of acceptance. And the path of acceptance can be used in any of these contexts, right? Where you're trying to understand how you relate to the world around you and come to terms with something that maybe you can't necessarily change, but have to change your behavior to make sense of it, whether that's, divorce or ADHD or, grieving serious illness or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And so he came up with this, what he calls the 5 stages, but it's actually 4 stages and a prelude, as Marty Cooper says.
Oh, okay.
Now, the first one is denial. That's prelude. Now, we know denial from the stages of grief.
That's the
right?
D and DABDA,
the DABDA. Yeah, the way Marty Cooper says is that, there is no problem. There's no difficulty. I'm not doing anything wrong. Everything's fine, right? I'm doing okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You sold me.
That is what Marty calls being asleep at the wheel.
Sure.
Stage 1 is recognition, right? Okay. I know I am fill in the blank. I know I am terrified of being unprepared. I know I have ADHD. I know I am depressed. I know any of these things, right? I know that is here. Also, I refuse to accept it because it doesn't fit my mental model, right? And what comes out of that can be just rage and frustration and exhaustion, and it spirals that fear, right? Because
it's like metal on metal.
Yeah, totally. Because your mind knows something's wrong, right? Your mind understands that you are fundamentally you're fighting something that may be broken. Right. You're trying to that it's there, but you can't do anything about it. That's just where you are. You need some sort of kick to get to move through that cycle. And like the stages of grief, this is not a linear stage. This is more like, Jeremy Bear Me. Like it's just, it is a stage that is written in curly cues, right?
Got it.
And so you jump back and forth between all these stages. So that was stage one, is recognition. I know there's a problem. I'm unwilling to accept that it exists.
Okay.
Stage two is resignation.
Well, in Indabda, it's anger. Acceptance is way at the end. Go ahead.
Right. Well, this is not even acceptance, right? Resignation is, I know that I am X. I know that I can't beat it. So I guess there's just nothing I can do.
Oh, giving up.
Yes. Yeah.
Got
Resignation is, my God, I just, it's like you can hear the truth in the statement. You can hear this future state where one day you're going to be able to make sense of this and rationalize it. But right now, today, all you're doing is saying, I know that I'm depressed and I am too exhausted to even attempt to beat it. I guess this is how I have to live my life.
Oof. Okay.
Right. I know I am terrified of not being prepared. I recognize it. Also, I know this maybe is
going to be too hard.
It's just
going to be too hard to get prepared.
Yeah,
so.
It's going to be too hard to get prepared, or I'm never gonna live without this fear. I'm never going to be able to get to the other side of it. That's resignation, stage two. Stage three is, and this will bake your noodle a little bit. This is not the last stage. Stage three is acceptance.
Not the last stage.
Right?
The devil, you say.
So,
well, is the last stage like snacks?
Hydrate. It is. It's just hydrate.
Okay, so acceptance.
Acceptance here is, and this is where a lot of people, you could stop, right? It says, yeah, I'm depressed. And I know I can't beat it by fighting it. So what do I do then? And it gives you the opportunity to start asking questions about it, to start saying, hey, I'm
not giving up.
I don't need to give up. That it turns out there are examples of people who are depressed, who are feeling these kinds of phobias and fears, who haven't given up. And you know what? Their lives, it turns out, they're kind of okay. Like they actually are able to move forward. I could see myself as being somebody like that, somebody who is not driven and owned by their depression, ADHD, anxiety, whatever.
So there's a big part of just optimism.
Maybe.
Also.
I don't know.
Like maybe a light through the clouds?
I can accept and not be optimistic about it, I guess. No, that's not true. You'd have to be optimistic about it. Otherwise, you're in resignation.
Because you think there's a chance.
Yeah.
Right. Then you stopped at that cul-de-sac. Yeah.
Now, optimism and good humor are two different things. I guess I can be optimistic and not happy about it.
Sure.
So, okay. Yeah. So that's acceptance. So now we've got our big three. We started denial, recognition, resignation, acceptance, and the final one. This is the one that that's you gotta do some work. It's embrace.
Oh,
so this is effectively leaning in, right? This says, okay, I'm depressed. I know I'm depressed. I accept that I'm depressed. I'm working with my depression openly. I'm not hiding from it. I'm not hiding it from the world around me. And honestly, I'm curious about what this experience is going to teach me and what I can potentially teach others about it.
Right.
Right. Because
and of course, the same can be said about anxiety.
Exactly.
You're using depression as a thing.
It's just fill in the blanks, right?
Sure.
I accept that I'm anxious. I accept that I live with anxiety, and I'm open about it, and I'm curious about it. And I recognize that it will not be an easy journey, but it is part of me. It is part of my self-identity. And this is something that I have to live with. And I also have to do other things in my life, so I cannot be driven by it.
I think the final stage should be start a podcast. Because I feel like that's sort of what we've done.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, it's a version of leaning into it and not just saying, I'm just going to be strong and not anxious. We're being vulnerable and we're sharing it and finding out that a lot of people, of course, feel the same way.
Well, and that was a really interesting observation that this idea of embrace even if you don't, it doesn't mean you're an expert, right? It doesn't mean that you've actually solved the problem, right? All it means is that you are bringing an openness and a vulnerability to your exploration of living with it, that I think can be really powerful. And in many respects, being able to be open about it enough to attempt to teach it, or at least illuminate it for others, is part of this stage embrace. That's, let's live loud and proud with whatever we are living with that we were once, scared of.
I love it.
Maybe it's worth it. I don't know. Look, I just think that this guy, Marty,
are you having trouble accepting acceptance?
A little bit. No, it's I can imagine somebody sitting out there listening to this saying, that's a bunch of hoo-ha. I don't have to live with it, and I'm not going to live with it. And, like,
who is this person?
Right?
Oh, he's a pirate.
I can imagine it sounding a little bit fluffy, and but
like kind of like a that's easy to say.
Right. 100%.
Sure.
But I also think it's worth just knowing this and knowing that Marty Cooper came up with this thing, and the stages are denial, recognition, resignation, acceptance, and embrace, because odds are, if you are growling like a pirate, it probably means you haven't embraced it yet. And maybe asking yourself some of those questions, or phrasing your relationship with whatever this thing is it might help you reach the other side of that. I prefer this model because I think the outcome, embrace, offers a little bit of joy, just a little dose of joy, because frankly, I get a great deal of joy out of doing things like this podcast and exploring these things and asking questions about anxiety, that I also live with. I think it's fantastic. And I just wish the same for other people who are struggling. I guess that's it. Mm-hmm. And also probably some Twinkies.
Oh, you're also wishing them some Twinkies?
Yeah, kind of.
So it was snacks.
It was snacks all along. Did you see what we did there?
What a twist. As Benjamin Franklin wrote in 1789 in a letter to John Baptiste Leroy, quote, "In this world, nothing can be said to be certain except death and taxes. And throughout history, some of these taxes have strained credulity. Why, back in 1698, Russian Tsar Peter the Great placed a tax on beards. In an attempt to bring Russia up to speed with Western Europe's trend for clean-shaven faces, Peter imposed annual beard taxes on his subjects. His poorer subjects were allowed to beard it up for just 2 kopecks a year, while wealthier citizens had to pay a whopping 100 rubles. Bearded taxpayers were given a copper token to carry around as proof they had paid the fee. On the other end, men who refused to pay the tax could be forcibly shaved by the police on sight." The Russian beard tax of the 1690s was a mandatory and stupid way to spend one's money. Looking for a way to spend your dough that's both optional and fun? Why not become a What's That Smell Panic Pal? For just $35, non-renewing, it's just one payment of $35, you will help support the time and expenses for the production of this season. And also, you will have access to the live stream. You can be watching us. You can be watching me mess this up right now. You will also have access to members-only episodes like the COVID sessions and other bonus material that we have coming down the pike. You will also get a sticker and a certificate of best friendship signed by both Pete and I, and of course you will have our undying love. Speaking of love, we love doing this show, but it is not free, so your one-time contribution of $35 would be great. Kind of dribbled to an end there, but past that, back to the show. Sports, Pete. As we talked about in the first episode of the 3rd season, way back in March of 2019, you'll remember that I shared some stories about playing sports growing up. Well, here's a story I forgot to tell.
Oh, good, yeah.
When I was about 10 years old, I was playing soccer in a league called BJS, Boulder Junior Soccer. And our coach always took notes about us on a clipboard to see how we fit best in the team. And during one practice, I saw the clipboard because we were all huddled together, and it was very easy to find my name, Pete, because unlike the list of my peers, there were so many words next to mine. After my name, he'd written, "Tommy is so useful. As far as I'm concerned, the rest of these children can go play soccer in hell, because I have seen the future of soccer, and its name is Tom W. Metz III. He's a big, strong, brave boy, and will always only wear big, strong, brave boy pants. His daddy is very proud of his big, strong boy, but I wish I was Tom's daddy and not just his coach, because he's so good at sports and being a big, strong boy." And the cat's in the cradle and the silver spoon, little brave boy.
Sorry,
and daddy
I just had to get some more iced tea.
Brave boy, I don't know dad.
What is this
I'm
playing?
a big, brave
going
boy,
on
dad.
right now?
I'm a big,
Why does that
big,
sound like
brave
me?
Boy.
Tom,
Why am I doing the cats in the cradle? What is this, Pete?
what are you doing right now?
What was that,
That-
Pete? That was me, but I'm me.
What are you doing right now?
Pete.
What are we
Pete,
doing? Why would you?
That is so strange that would just randomly happen, because that ties into exactly what I wanted to talk about this week. What a spectacular coincidence.
Who's playing who now? Are you playing me? Are you playing yourself? Are you
I've
playing
always
the
been
audience?
myself.
What is going on right now?
Pete, it sounded like me, but I'm me. How could it be? And with that, Pete, I start with a question.
Oh dear.
Pete, what do you know about deep fakes?
Oh goodness.
Tech Talk.
Okay, that's weird that it's coming from you, and also delightful. Deep fakes. So you just deep faked me with you.
I don't know how that happened, but it sounded pretty fake, because I've never said those words. That's not what his clipboard said. Avid listeners will remember written next to my name were two words, not useful. So that was a rewrite of history. I think that was some sort of bot.
That was a real Abe Lincoln kind of thing
Yeah.
that you just did to me. So I do know a little bit about deepfakes. I know that they improved Henry Cavill's mouth in Justice League.
By getting rid of the mustache or something?
Because, he had a mustache because he had to come back. They did reshoots, but they wouldn't let him shave the mustache because he was already doing Mission Impossible. And so they erased his mustache with computers, and he looks terrible. And so the deep fakers came along and used their powers for good. And so you could search for it. And actually, the deep fakers have made a better Henry Cavill than the studio.
That is a really positive example of deepfakes.
Deepfakes. I'm just trying
And
to
that's
set
all
the bar.
deepfakes are used for.
I'm just trying to set the bar so high. I want to start in defense of deepfakes. That's Pete's position today.
Yes. Very, very quickly, deepfakes, which is a fairly lazy portmanteau of deep learning and fake, are synthetic media in which a person in an existing image, audio, or video is replaced with someone else. While the act of faking content is not new, deepfakes leverage powerful techniques from machine learning and AI to manipulate or generate visual and audio content with a high potential to deceive. Thank you, Wikipedia. Take the rest of the day off. Because we are not a science podcast, I'm going to skip over how actually they are made and instead concentrate on why they make me anxious. Unlike the very handsome Mr. Cavill that Pete brought up, deepfakes are being used in fake celebrity pornographic videos, revenge porn, literal fake news, hoaxes, blackmail, and financial fraud. And at a time when misinformation is through the roof, deepfake technology has the potential to create absolute chaos because it presents a reality where people cannot easily trust what they see and hear. So now, Pete, that I've laid that, how do you feel about deepfakes?
Well, first of all, I love that we live in an era, my friend, where you get to say words like literal fake news, and we have to parse that exists.
Because it got hijacked.
Totally.
Fake news became disagreed about news. But this is literal fake news.
Yeah, no, I hate it. And I hate that. I love that the technology exists because it allows, creatives to do some really amazing things. But the way it is being used to in the mouths of politicians, and, that there are people who are getting our politicians to say things that they never said, using their heads and mouths and faces, is, I find, disagreeable.
It is very disagreeable, and it's so realistic. Yeah. I have found you can just do a quick search on deepfakes, and you can find plenty of examples. Actually, a company named Deep Trace that was founded in 2018 to provide equipment to better detect deepfake audio and video. They published a report on the state of deepfakes, and it found more than 15,000 deepfake videos online, a 100% increase over just the year before.
Wow.
Because it's the bar to make these, and the systems that you need in order to do these are just getting cheaper and easier and easier.
Yeah, right.
Do you do any deepfake stuff? Have you ever been?
Do you do any deepfakes?
Meaning, like, I don't know, you work with a lot of
me, man.
I live like you work with a lot of companies and stuff. I just didn't know if that was. I feel like you're a tech guy and you work with a lot of tech companies. Right. If any of them have ever bumped against this.
No, I do want to tell you something that's interesting though, which I think you'll find interesting. So, as you know, I edit a lot of podcasts. Mm-hmm. Have we ever talked about the tool Descript?
No.
Descript is a new entrant to podcast and video editing, and it does things that are really cool. On the surface, and I'll just try to be brief, I take your audio file and my audio file from this podcast, and I drop it into the Descript editor, and what happens is I line it up. I line the tracks up in a traditional kind of track editor so that you're talking, I'm talking, you're talking, I'm talking. But then I switch over to the script mode, and it provides an incredibly high quality script, a transcript of our conversation. And to edit the podcast, I literally delete words that I don't want to be in the podcast.
From the document?
From the document. It's like I'm editing a Word document. From there...
Oh, so you can switch things all around?
You can. You can literally edit a podcast by copying and pasting. I can copy a paragraph and move it to a different place. I can do all of that. I can select the word I can select that word, and there is an option that says, hey, do you want to delete all filler words? And it will go through the entire document, find all instances of like whatever,
and just get rid of them,
allow me to delete them, and it will go ahead and edit the podcast in such a way that it sounds seamless in most cases. Now, in some cases, you have to go back because it just doesn't sound all that great. But mostly, I find it to be incredibly good. Now, this is why I need to talk to you in the context of deepfakes, because it's amazing on its own. But if you subscribe to the Pro version, they have what's called a feature that's called overdub.
Okay.
I talk to Descript for 10 minutes, and it records my voice. Uh-huh. And it creates a likeness of my voice.
Nope.
And then in the script that I'm editing, if I misspoke and I said, Audio Hijack version 7 is out, and then I can select, that's wrong. It should have said, version 21. And I can select version 21 and say overdub, type the words version 21, and
you don't overdub it.
My voice. It creates a synthetic version of Pete, and I can then record a podcast, full sentences that are created out of my voice. So just a minute ago, what people who were not watching the live stream would not know is that you said over and over again, the tax papers,
portmanteau,
tax papers, and portmanteau. Right. Now, in the finished version of this podcast, you didn't. I don't include the fact that you said you have to walk around carrying your tax papers, but really it's about taxpayers. In your support bit, but I could have let you go and just recreate that with an overdub of your voice. With everyone that I podcast with, I could have you go in and record your voice, and I could create a digital version of you. And I'm not kidding. It makes me really leery just that exists. As a podcaster, somebody's been doing it for, a lot of years. It's I find it disconcerting. I have never used it. It
seems, there's some eerie stuff. And it sounds like you're telling me that you no longer need me for this podcast. You have a zillion hours of me talking.
I sure
do.
You
just shove that in. You can have me saying anything you want. Well, that started very positive, and that's a cool editing thing.
Yeah.
But then it ended negative because of all the terrible stuff that is happening with deepfakes. I always assumed that deepfake technology was created by jerks who wanted to use it for bad reasons. Not at all. Like in a science fiction movie, this is a case of scientists doing things because they can and not thinking about whether or not they should. Pete, I would love to play you something real quick.
Sure.
This is from a November 2019 episode of the Science Podcast Radio Lab. In this clip, you'll hear reporter Simon Adler talking to Ira Kemmelmacher-Schlizerman, a professor in computer science at the University of Washington. Now, Kemmelmacher-Schlizerman and her team were at the leading edge of deepfake technology. And during this clip, during this little snippet, I think you can hear her realize that her technology might not be a great idea in real time.
We're in a moment where truth seems to be sort of an open what is true has become an open discussion, and this seems to be adding fuel on the fire of sort of competing narratives in a way that I find troubling, and I'm just curious that you don't.
I think that people, if people know that such technology exists, then they will be more skeptical. My guess. I don't know. But if people know that fake news exists, if they know that fake text exists, fake videos exist, fake photos exist, then everyone is more skeptical in what they read and see.
But like a man in North Carolina, I think he was from North Carolina, believed from a fake print article that Hillary Clinton was running a sex ring out of a pizza parlor in D.C., which is like insane. This man believed it and showed up with a gun. And if people are at a moment where they are willing to believe stories as ludicrous as that, like I don't expect them to wonder if this video is real or not.
So what are you asking?
I'm asking, are you afraid of the power of this? And if not, why?
I'm just giving my, I don't know. I'm answering your questions, but I'm a technologist, I'm a computer scientist. So, not really, because I know how to, I know that this technology is reversible. I mean, there is not worried too much.
Wow.
Right?
Oh my God. That's wow.
That is pretty remarkable. That was back in 2019 when this stuff was when the leash was coming off. How could you not see the danger in this? Or am I being mean because misinformation has been such a hot button issue that I'm looking at this in hindsight? I don't think so. I think that right away you should see the negative implications of what this kind of stuff can do.
Because I have such a hard time with having a bunch of, scientists, you're all sitting around a table and somebody says, hey, I just invented this thing that could take Joe's face and we could put any words coming out of Joe's face, Dr. Joe the scientist, that we want. And one of those things is you should check out Joe's pizza place that he runs, but he doesn't run a pizza place, let alone a child sex operation in the basement. Wouldn't Joe at some point say, wait a minute, I don't run a pizza place. That would be, it's not a truth. What's the word?
What is that?
Right? How do you not see that?
Yeah. I know.
Oh my God. I know we have a tendency to take great technology and use it for its absolute basest, most horrific utility. But this is, that you couldn't see this one coming is extraordinary.
And it's in ways, when I was doing research for this, just to point out just one or two other ways that it's being used is pretty fascinating. Francesca Panetta at MIT offered this up as an example of how a deepfake can be used for, if you remember on that list, financial fraud. With scheduled public quarterly earnings that are recorded, it would be possible to take a CFO's voice recording and turn it into what sounds like an urgent directive to employees to share their bank information.
Oh my God.
Or imagine a similar recording, but this time a CEO announces company-wide layoffs. The market responds. The stocks crash. The company goes under, all because of a deepfake. This is stuff that just never occurred to me. But the uses, to use the word that we used earlier, are legion. They are incredible. And then one other thing occurred to me. I'm sure when I say occurred to me, I'm sure it's out there by far, but deepfakes don't just give someone the opportunity to disguise fake images or recording as real. It also provides an opportunity for people to dismiss real events as fake.
Oh,
Because now you can hide behind, think of the bus tape when
Yeah.
Trump says he likes to grab women's anatomies. He adorably did come out and say it's fake. He deep faked himself before
Yeah.
deep faking was a thing. But if deep fakes are out there and acknowledged, then
Well, this
everyone
is-
can say everything is
This
fake.
is exactly what she was talking about. But she was talking about it giving humanity the credit that we do not deserve, right?
No.
She was
Right.
suggesting that, oh, don't worry. As long as everybody knows this stuff exists, of course they're going to check sources or and play out what it would mean to live in a civil society where you can accept that this technology exists. We don't
Right.
live there. We trust what
Right.
we hear because context is everything. Context
Yes.
is everything. And looking at a deepfake demo, knowing you're looking at a deepfake demo, you can say, hey, that's amazing. But seeing somebody has deepfaked old Harrison Ford into the face of young Harrison Ford in Solo,
Yep,
you
that's a
kind
thing.
of watch that for a second and think, wait, was Harrison Ford actually in that? Or watching
Right.
The Irishman and seeing what they do to de-age those guys. That's
Right.
the same technology, and they're able to make reliable likenesses of these people at different points in their lives. You could
Yeah.
generate fake histories from people. God, I regret even saying that out loud if somebody hasn't thought of it, right?
Right.
I could create you as a youngster talking about, there's no joke that finishes that. That's
Yeah, I don't know.
appropriate. But I could create that out of deepfake. I'm a little bit on fire about this, Tom.
I get it. So where do we go from here? Down. No. One of the larger problems, as with all misinformation, of course, is this is a bit of less of a problem of misinformation and more of a lack of critical thinking. That people are just taking it. And this is going to ramp that up. That same person at MIT does say the social answer is we all build an immune system. We start asking ourselves questions. Who is the person presenting this image to me? Where did it come from? What is evident? What is actually authentic? And having that general demeanor of asking these questions certainly helps. To end on just a very brief good news story, just about 1 month ago when this comes out, a 17-year-old student named Greg Tarr in Ireland won the big Ireland science contest. I don't have it here. A major science contest that students do for creating an AI that can detect faked videos over 20% faster than anything that we've had up to date. And so even the young realize this is a problem.
Yeah.
And there are whole companies, like I mentioned, that other company, Deep Trace, where the one good thing is enough people realize that this is a serious problem and they are running at it.
Yeah, I think that's
That's
really important because I don't care for the solution of, we have to develop an immunity for it, like counting on a cultural solution for this. And that's kind of the bind we're in. We don't know how to teach this kind of stuff yet. We don't know how to demonstrate what it means for kids to look for the right sources, right information. We don't teach that like we used to. I don't know, but we're in an era of massive just signal to noise issues, right? Like having to find good sources. We don't know how to teach it. I think demanding that kind of we have to develop an immunity is a little bit much.
Is maybe a little too sure.
But I think it does demonstrate that the vaccine for this is more technology. And that's got to give you a little heartburn. It is more systems to detect. And instead of having, or maybe in addition to running antivirus software on your computer, you're going to have to run
anti-lie software, right?
You're going to have to have something that can flag and say, hey, this was manufactured. This is not authentic.
Yeah. I think that's what we have to do. Or do what I do and just get all your information from Parler. All right. Bye, everybody.
Thank you all so much for joining us for this episode. This week's tune is Flutes Will Chill by Kicktracks.
I'm Tommy Mess III.
And I'm Pete Wright. Thank you for downloading. We'll be back next week on What's That? Smell?
Oh,